I have seen all of these things occur multiple times in the last year.
So not just in the history of WebPKI, but in the past year.
So I am quite confident in 2024 that I'm aware of 4 outright lies that were told on these public forums by public CAs, where I know they were lying.
That's wild.
Hello and welcome to Root Causes, the PKI and Security podcast where a pair of industry veterans talk about all matters digital certificates and PKI. We're here at Toronto Sessions Season 3. I'm Tim Callan, Chief Experience Officer at Sectigo, and of course, I'm here with Jason Sirocco, Senior Fellow at Sectigo. So Jason, we're here at Toronto Sessions Season 3, and one of the things that I really want to talk about, we all know that 2024 was a big year for Bugzilla. And I had the opportunity to observe firsthand a lot of really bad practices for public CAs on Bugzilla. And I thought for the sake of, we have a non-trivial community of people who watch this this podcast who also pay close attention to WebPKI, public CA media like MDSP, Bugzilla, CCADB, et cetera. We thought it might be useful to go down this list to just kind of put on everybody's radar what good behavior and bad behavior looks like on Bugzilla.
I think this makes a lot of sense, and the timing's right.
Yeah.
We, as an industry, the certificate authorities, we hold a lot of trust.
Yeah.
People hold a lot of trust in us, and I think it is very important to re-educate the public, re-educate ourselves about what it means to be a good CA.
And it's a good reminder. Like even good CAs can get in bad habits, can make mistakes, and it's good to be reminded of this stuff, I think.
Let's hear it, Tim.
So, all right. So, and here's, I have a list. So I have 12 things. CAs, avoid these 12 things in your Bugzilla incidents. Here's what I was thinking, Jay. Let's go down the list and define them. Then let's go back down them and talk about why they're a problem and how to rectify that.
Tim, right before you get to the list, how about for some of the listeners who are not as on a daily basis living and breathing WebPKI?
A little background?
A little bit of background.
Okay, I think that's great. Thank you. That's a good suggestion. So there are a number of sets of governing rules that public CAs need to follow. And one of them is that all root programs have some kind of root program requirements. And one of the big set of root program requirements that we really care about is Mozilla. They were early on, they were kind of the first browser with a real codified public set of root program requirements. And Mozilla online properties that encourage online dialogue are fundamentally open. And there's an expectations that everything is done in the public because it is one of the world's largest open source projects. And so as a result, if you want to be in the Mozilla root store, you're expected to be very transparent and very public in your dealings with what you do as a public CA. And so some of these tools that I rattled off, there's probably 3 that are important to us here. One of them is called Bugzilla, and this is the Mozilla bug base. And every time a CA has an incident that meets certain criteria or it qualifies as an incident, that CA has to open an incident report, respond to public questions, follow a certain set of codified behaviors, which include fixing the problem and demonstrating that the problem should be expected not to occur again. And then at the end of that, you close out the incident. And all of this is done in the public, and members, anybody with a browser can come and create an account and ask questions and challenge assumptions and do things along those lines. There are a couple other ones that are noteworthy. One of them is called MDSP, which is Mozilla's online meeting message board. And so for things for the Mozilla root program and Mozilla as a public CA browser, that's where we go to have discussions that aren't CA incidents. And then there's another one called CCADB, which is the exact same thing, but instead of being focused on Firefox specifically, it's focused on the whole body of the CCADB participating browsers, which is Firefox, Chrome, Apple. So if you have a topic that's bigger than just Firefox, you bring it to CCADB. If you have a topic that's specific to Firefox, you bring it to MDSB. And if it is a misissuance or another CA operational error, you bring it to Bugzilla. So I sort of said avoid these 12 things in your Bugzilla incidents just because Bugzilla is the most frequently used of these. But this, what we're talking about here, applies to all of them.
That is perfect.
All right. Thank you, Jay. That's a good edit. So why don't we run down the list, we'll say what it is, and then we'll come back and we'll comment on them. And again, I've got thoughts on why this is bad and what to do about it. I'll say a couple other things before we get going. Just by the nature of a list like this, there's a certain amount of overlapping. So if we look at any individual episode of bad behavior, there's a very good chance that it ticks more than one of these boxes. But by having these boxes here, we've got a real useful codification of what to do and not to do. This is my first glance at it. Feel free to go on LinkedIn and tell me what I missed, and maybe we'll update this over time. But this is where we're sitting right now. The second thing I'm going to say is of these 12 items, I try to kind of batch them. So the first 3 are close to each other, and I would say, like, you shouldn't do any of these things, but the first 3 are really unforgivable because they're fundamentally dishonest in their dealings with the web PKI, and the last 3 are really unforgivable. And then the ones in the middle are, you still shouldn't do them. And then the last point I'm going to make is that I have seen all of these things occur multiple times in the last year.
So not just in the history of web PKI, but in the past year.
So this isn't theoretical. This is going on. This is CAs. Come on, guys, get better.
And that helps to explain why you've chosen things not to do rather than a list of here's a list of good behaviors. This is a warning list of don't do these things.
Correct. And we could flip these, right? Every one of these could have been written as a good behavior, and I did give that some thought. And the reason I went this way is because I am seeing these behaviors happening. And part of what I want to say to the community is there isn't really an excuse for any of this. And you should look at yourself and you should ask yourself, honestly, am I doing this? And if the answer is yes, you need to change.
Let's hear them.
Okay, let's hear them. So number 1 on the list, obfuscation.
People trying to hide what they're doing?
People trying to look like they are telling everything, but really not tell everything.
Carefully crafted
Carefully crafted things, weasel-wordy stuff, partial answers to questions. If there's 4 questions in a post, maybe you answer 1, 2, and 4 and just kind of forget about 3. See a lot of this sort of stuff going on.
You know, I just have to have a thought here, Tim, which is a lot of the problems that are just everyday issues that have come up on the Bugzilla are, mistakes are inevitable and these things are expected. And so nothing looks better to me than when a CA basically says, yep, here was the problem.
100%.
And just complete transparency.
Absolutely. And I liken it a lot to software errors, like bugs, software bugs, traditional bugs. Everybody knows that every software package of any kind of complexity has bugs, that it's not realistic to ship bug-free software. And what the good vendors do is they admit it, they own it, they encourage the public to tell them, they fix it quickly, they talk about what happened and why, they have blameless postmortems, and they push patches. And that is what we need CAs to do. And honestly, any CA that's doing its earnest best is going to get a lot of breaks from the browsers in the community because we know that a CA is hard. We know it's hard to be a CA. CAs that are going to get themselves in trouble are CAs that aren't really doing their earnest best. One of the ways I framed this in the past, Jay, is you have competence problems and integrity problems. And in, I think, all but one of the distrusts that have ever occurred in the web PKI, and there's been something like 14 of them, all but one, there was some kind of integrity problem in the mix.
Wow.
right? So if you're committing integrity problems, this is bad, right? Your integrity, without your integrity, you can't be a steward of the web PKI. So obfuscation, that's the first one, trying to hide stuff. Second one, obstruction.
Obstruction.
Trying to prevent the process from happening. And this takes a variety of forms, like refusing to answer questions or deliberately answering questions that were not the questions that was asked, hiding behind excuses, things like, well, we have customer NDAs, so we won't discuss that, or my legal team says I can't discuss that. Silly things that are fundamentally obstructionist.
Yeah, and it defeats the whole purpose of the Bugzilla forum.
It's anti-transparent.
Exactly.
Right? It's anti-transparent. We're not going to get to why it's bad. We're going to get back to that. And then the third one, and I think this is connected to these first two, is letting negative emotions take the driver's seat. And this happens. It's kind of crazy, but you can look at some of these posts from CAs and it comes across as defensive or angry or whiny. And that's not the point, right? If there is an error in your operation, that's a fact. And if that's upsetting to you that other people understand what facts are, you got to get over that. You're a public CA, right? This is our jobs. We're grown-ups. And in particular, I made a list of things. So here's some specific things that I noticed. First of all, being insulting to other community members. And I just, for the second one for B, I wrote churlishness, just general churlishness, just nastiness. And then third one is pettiness. And so I'll give you an example of pettiness. I'm not going to name any names, by the way, on this episode. But there's an ongoing set of incidents right now, and we've got a CA that is entrenched in a position about a major browser's stated policy. And this is as indefensible as positions come. There's plain language, and their stated policy is just plain language. But this CA does not want to admit that they were wrong. So what they're claiming is that this browser's policy has changed between when the bug was written up, almost a year ago, and today, as a way to get out of admitting they were wrong while also closing the bug. And they're saying, well, they changed their policy, so moving forward, we're going to do it the way they want. No, they always did it that way. You just screwed up. And the reason that the only reason I can come up with that they don't want to do it is they just don't want to publicly say that they got something wrong. It's just petty.
Jeez.
Right? So all of this stuff looks bad. These first three, these are a bad look. And the reason these are unforgivable CAs is just because we have to question your commitment to the process when you do these things. When you do these things, I don't believe that this is somebody who is really openly trying to improve.
I think what we've learned in 2024, Tim, is that the process is why the CAs are trusted.
Yes.
And
yes. Absolutely. Right? And there is a mantra of continuous improvement that is built into all of this. This is a fairly new thing. Until 2012, there weren't any rules. Everybody just did whatever they wanted. And we all knew that it was going to be a learning process for the entire web PKI community. And there's an expectation that's built in that even today, 13 years later, that we haven't gotten to a perfect end state. And of course, we're never going to get to a perfect end state because the world keeps changing. But just even making up for that deficit of having no rules at all 13 years ago, even that, everybody understands isn't done yet. And that means that there's an expectation that everybody, root programs and CAs, and auditors, and other parts of the ecosystem are committed to continual improvement, right? And continual improvement, the need for continual improvement is not a personal insult. And don't act like it is. Okay, so that's 1, 2, and 3. Number 4, lateness. Lateness. So there's a few expectations where things are supposed to happen in specific time frames. When you find out you have a misissuance error, you're supposed to report it within 72 hours. Or a Bugzilla bug, which isn't always misissuance, you're supposed to report it within 72 hours. Not 73 hours, 72 hours. If there are questions on Bugzilla, you need to answer them within 1 week. Exactly 7 days, not 8 days. And also you need to maintain a weekly cadence of some kind of update. If you have, when an incident occurs, you have 2 weeks to have an incident report and a fuller, if other parts need to be filled in, but you need a complete incident report to the full extent of your knowledge within 2 weeks. And then the last one is if you have what we call a next update date, which is where Mozilla can set a date and say, look, we don't need to hear from you until this day. Like, let's say I say, look, it's all done, but we got an engineering project. We got to fix this one thing. It's going to take 45 days. Mozilla will pick a date in the future. They say, okay, I'll set an update, next update here. When you have a next update date, you have to update by that date, even if it's to say we're not done yet. So these are well understood. They're well codified. There's no ambiguity on any of this. And we just routinely see people just miss these deadlines.
When there's openings for the bad guy, when there's potential to have problems on the internet, timeliness is important.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, and for a lot of these, I'd say for your average Bugzilla bug, my concern is less about security and more about interoperability. Interoperability is the biggest thing we get out of this because every machine's got to connect to every other machine, and it's just got to work, right? But either way, interoperability is critical. Without that, all of our digital systems stop, right? So yes, lateness, just... All right, number 5, improper markdown, which can include no markdown at all. Now, these are text-based bulletin board systems, and sometimes we're putting up big, complicated messages, and there is a set of markdown, very common, right, very HTML-ish, that you can put in that will give you bolds and change font sizes and bullets and all of that good stuff. And there are published rules around how the markdown works, so you can go read, so you can see exactly what your options are in markdown. There's a preview mode, so you can look and see what it actually is going to look like before you commit to it. And then for certain actions, like an incident report, like a closing incident, there is a specific format that you want you to use, including the markdown, so that readers can navigate it. And we just frequently see people either just do terrible, horrible markdown, like what were you thinking, or none at all. And maybe that's a little bit of a judgment call if it's in your bug and you're just supposed to use the markdown to help people navigate it. But in these prescribed formatted incident episodes like a preliminary incident report or a final incident report or a bug closing statement, it's clear that the markdown is codified. And if you don't use it, you're just making it harder for everybody, right? And that might go back to obstructionism or obfuscation, right? That's a way to obfuscate.
So sometimes it's not laziness, it's people hiding things.
It could be, right? And then that flows right into number 6. Number 6 being failure to follow clear procedures, right? Those are clear procedures. Or my favorite one of this that's going on right now is this closing statement, where when you want to close a bug, you're supposed to put certain facts in a certain way and have a certain markdown. See, it's just don't seem to wanna. They keep putting up these messages saying, okay, we're ready to close this bug. And there is a clear closing statement. It's not ambiguous. It's what you've been told to do. And they just don't follow that procedure, right? So again, some of that could be a bad attitude, like having negative emotions in the driver's seat. Some of that could be obfuscation, or it could be the next one on the list, number 7, which is failure to understand the expectations of a public CA. And we might put this on the unforgivable list too. But the kind of the poster child for this one was last year. One of the 2 CAs that was distrusted last year, e-commerce monitoring. And I'm going to say the spring. Part of the incident report is a section called root causes. You'll like that, Jay. And what do you think the section called root causes is supposed to do?
supposed to get to the root cause of what the problem was.
Yes, absolutely what it's for. So they had a bug that they posted, and under root causes, the whole thing said roots not affected. Head explodes. Boom. It's funny in a way, right? Because they're using a different use of the word root. It's kind of a PKI pun. It's not an intentional PKI pun. But it just shows this egregious lack of understanding of what the community and the browsers, and in this case, particularly Mozilla, and also the CCADB community, because they're all kind of bought into Bugzilla as a concept, is expecting you to do. And I know the BRs are long and complicated, but the root program requirements really are not. And so if you don't understand what the root programs expect of you, you're just not reading, because they're not that long and they're not that complicated. And you really should be able to keep in mind everything the root programs are saying. So that's a crazy one. And then one of the things that they do, that was number 7. Number 8, one of the things that the browsers do expect, and that CCADB does expect, is they expect CAs to follow and extrapolate from all Bugzilla bugs. As a CA, you're supposed to follow the resources I said before. Bugzilla, MDSP, CCADB, and not just the stuff that's about you. Because the idea is if CAA has an error, CAB is supposed to go look at their own operations and say, oh, we're making the same mistake. Let's go fix it, right? And one of the things that browsers get really grouchy about, and commentators on the public CA list get very grouchy about, is when the same mistake gets repeated. And they get extra special grouchy when the same mistake gets repeated by the same CA. And so not only do we see CAs that aren't learning from each other's bugs, we see CAs who aren't learning from their own bugs, who do the same thing again. And I've got open bugs right now that I'm monitoring where that's going on. And it sort of undermines the purpose of the whole thing.
Yeah, learning from your mistakes should be a part of this.
Correct. So failure to extrapolate from all Bugzilla bugs or even your own bugs, that's number 8. Number 9, see this a lot, shallow root cause analysis. So you've got a software error and it causes a certificate report to get lost and it doesn't get dealt with. And they come back and they say, well, there was a software error that caused the certificate report. Bug's been fixed. That's my action item, root cause analysis. I'm all done. And then the browsers will come back and say, no. Do you have QA? Do you have, there was some other flaw, right? Was this QA'd? Maybe your test beds weren't designed correctly. Maybe your initial architecture wasn't correct. How come this happened in the first place? What's going on in your process that allowed that software error to exist? And you've got to go fix that. So what they're looking for is a deeper root cause analysis. What they don't want to do is do a bunch of whack-a-mole, right? They want to have a deeper root cause analysis that will cause meaningful quality improvement in the CA, where we know there's still going to be bugs, but we want those bugs to happen for new undiscovered reasons, not the reasons we knew about but didn't do anything about, right? Yeah. So shallow root cause analysis, you see a lot. Now, the last 3, 10, 11, and 12, once again, I'm back into unforgivable, okay? I think you'll see why. Number 10, lies and cover-ups. So I can't prove it, but I follow Bugzilla very closely. We have resources. We mine CT logs. We look at other things like this. I am quite confident in 2024 that I'm aware of 4 outright lies that were told on these public forums by public CAs, where I know they were lying.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or cover-ups, where I don't think anyone's going to find out I did this bad thing, so I'm just going to not say it. And that's an integrity problem, right? So we're not getting into why it's bad. Lies and cover-ups, it's a real thing. Number 11, refusal to admit your errors. I was just talking about that as an early example. They just won't admit it was an error. It's an error. Everybody knows it's an error. It's there in black and white. It's proven factually that it was an error. You got a CA just won't admit it. Just won't. Just keep saying no, keep saying no, keep saying no. This is part of what got interest distrusted. Won't admit it's an error. And then directly connected to that, number 12, refusal to change. That was also part of what got interest distrusted. Just, nope, we're not going to change. We're just not going to change. We won't change. Right? So that's the 12.
Wow, Tim. Great list. Great list.
Do you want to go back and, all right. So obfuscation, obstruction, let's put those together. So why is this a problem? Why is it a problem?
The whole point of Bugzilla, the whole point of the WebPKI process is transparency.
Yes,
And
correct.
The whole point is transparency.
And it depends on the CA as not only a willing participant, but the primary source of that transparency, right? We self-report almost every bug. The CA has to be the primary source of that transparency, right? We've got a goal, which is we want all the information to be in that initial incident report so that there's no meaningful questions that anyone can ask. Right?
This is not like general cybersecurity where the trend is you typically don't hear about companies finding out, oh, I have a vulnerability, I have a, I had a breach. Quite often that's done by a third party, found by a third party. And that's not good. It shows that there's still a real lack of maturity. We can't afford to have that lack of maturity in the CAs. They need to be the source of that information most of the time.
Or even if they're not. Sometimes other people discover
it's perfectly fine.
And they might send them a certificate report, and that's okay, and then the CA's got to write that up. Or they might just self-report. Sometimes people just report, and they tell the Bugzilla before they tell the CA. And that's probably not the best way to do it, but when it happens, a CA can still embrace it and handle it with grace and get in there and figure out what's going on. So obfuscation and obstruction, that's why it's bad. Putting negative emotions in the driver's seat, why is that bad?
In any kind of process, human nature is going to show up.
Yeah.
But it's almost like another form of obfuscation.
Yes, and it interferes. It interferes with this open discovery of information. It interferes with this dialogue about making things better. And then it's just small. Like, what are we, 12? Is this the playground? Like, really? Do you have to find sneaky little ways to shoot barbs at your critics? Really? And I think it's a bad look. I think the other thing I'm going to say is for any CA, if you're doing this or you're letting whoever you have posting do this because they can't rein it in and control their own emotions, it looks bad for your whole organization, right? It looks like you aren't in control of your people. Looks like you're not committed to the right things in transparency and self-improvement and excellence. It's just a really bad look for a CA. Lateness. We kind of got into that one, right? The whole point, the reason we have these rules around these cadences is because things got to get forward. Things got to get solved.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Tim. I think from a security standpoint, as I think you talked about it, the interoperability standpoint, timeliness is critical in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's probably pretty straightforward. Improper markdown, we kind of got into the problem with it. Problem with improper markdown is it makes it harder for the community to navigate and work with these bugs, right? Big walls of text are just hard to deal with. And perhaps it is deliberate obfuscation, right? And deliberate obstruction, and I do think sometimes that goes on. Perhaps it's just laziness or lack of understanding of how to use the tools or lack of understanding of the expectations. But whatever those two reasons are, at the end of the day, they have the effect of impairing the public dialogue and the public understanding and the learning from the whole community, which is the biggest point of Bugzilla. Not the only point, but the biggest point of Bugzilla and MDSP and CCADB is that ability for the community to learn.
it's not like Markdown is difficult.
Right.
That's not the barrier.
Yeah.
There's something else going on.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why that's bad. And then connected, like the second one is kind of the same thing reframed. Failure to follow clear procedures has the same problem, has the same impact and the same problem. We're expecting things to happen with these procedures. They're there for a reason, right? An incident report needs to carry all these things. And those things have specific things they're supposed to need. And if they don't, so for example, there's another area in the incident report that is basically, it's called impact. And what that's supposed to do is that's just supposed to be a list of all the affected certificates and services. So here's the 7 certificates that were affected, or I've including an attachment with the 90,000 certificates that were affected, right? Or these are the systems that were affected. And you regularly see CAs using the impact section to try to talk down the importance of the bug. Oh, there wasn't really impact here. Nobody was affected. Guys, we have a clear procedure. It's clearly codified what you're supposed to do with this section. And when you use this as a place, if this becomes the spin zone, rather than reporting facts that are relevant to the incident, then you're interfering with the process working correctly. Right?
I hear you.
Failure to follow and extrapolate from all Bugzilla bugs. We kind of discussed this, right? That the point is that if another CA is having an error, I may be having the same error and I didn't know. And when I read this bug, it's a chance for me to go fix my error. And maybe that means that I get lucky and I fix it before I have a misissuance incident. Say, oh, good, that would have got me too, but now I can fix it. And if I try to fix it, but I fix it wrong and I have an incident later, then the community will be forgiving of that, right? But if I just didn't know about it because I wasn't reading other bugs or asking how do those apply to me, then this multiplying effect that we're looking for, that these tools provide, is lost.
Right on, Tim.
Right? Shallow root cause analysis. What's the problem with that?
Again, that sounds like an obfuscation. It's another case of it, isn't it?
It could be, or laziness. Right?
Or laziness.
Could be laziness. But right. But at the end of the day, you don't really fix the problem. You're stuck in this whack-a-mole thing, right? And again, what the browsers don't want is, hey, I had a misissuance because, I had a period in the wrong place. Okay, did you fix it? Yeah, I've got some software that looks for periods in the wrong place. And then next week, well, I had a misissuance because I had a comma that was in the wrong place. Well, hold on. You wrote the period software and you didn't deal with commas, right? And so they want you to think bigger. And they want you to say, what are the lessons? What can I learn that will make me operationally better? And when that doesn't happen, it just slows down the improvement of everything, right? And it also shows, I think, shallow root cause analysis. If you go back to our episode about the privilege of being a public CA, one of the things that it shows is a lot of these rules wouldn't have to exist if every CA was committed to being their best self. And the fact that these rules exist at all states that there are a lot of CAs that aren't committed to being their best self. Right? And shallow root cause analysis indicates that you're not committed to being your best self. Right?
Being your best self, Tim, I think I'd like to return to that at the very end.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's kind of a theme that runs through everything on this list. Lies and cover-ups. Where do we begin?
Oh my God, that's just flat out.
You are a steward of the public trust. You are one of approximately 50 organizations on the globe who has been given the opportunity to vouch for public identity, and you're going to tell lies in public? Really? This is horrible. This is like being a crooked cop. This is like being a judge who takes bribes. It is the opposite of what you're here to be.
It is utterly unacceptable. And I'll tell you what, I work for a CA, you do too. the whole point of this is we want to stick up for our industry as a whole.
Yeah.
We want to be trusted as a whole, and any of the players that are doing that, it really literally is like being the good cop or the good judge who looks at the bad guys and go, "You're making a bad name for all of us."
Absolutely. It smears everybody. And if you go back to the analogy we've talked to on root causes in the past about if the web PKI is this wall, keeping the invaders out of the safe zone, any bad CA is a hole in that wall. And it's bad for the wall, and it's bad for everybody behind the wall, regardless of which CA it is or where it is. So lies are a huge problem. Refusal to admit your errors.
This one is truly on the unforgivable list because the process is the thing. The problems aren't the thing.
Yeah, continual improvement. If you won't admit that you made a mistake, continual improvement will not occur. You are throwing away the concept of improvement. You're just refusing to get better.
Exactly, Tim.
And refusal to change. Same thing.
Yep. Yeah. It's on the same level.
Yeah.
So Tim, I'd like to talk about being the best CA that you can be.
Okay.
You know, we've both been around a long time in this industry, and we've known some of the personalities that are behind some of the human side of this.
Yeah.
Because if it was truly an automated process,
There's a very real human side of this for sure.
and let's talk about the humans.
Yeah.
Anytime that you have a process where human beings sometimes stick their nose into the process in a way that degrades it, and it affects that company overall as a CA. And some of these operations are large commercial operations who have shareholders and interests. And the thing is, I just want to get your take on this, Tim. Because of the fact that sometimes there's bad apples, right, who have some of these bad habits going on. Yeah. You don't have to be a web PKI 30-year expert to understand what this list means.
Yes.
I agree. I think, Tim, you reading off this list today and explaining it very well is useful for people who are in compliance programs of other certificate authorities.
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest that perhaps it's time to organize your company as a CA so that there's an adult in the room who's overseeing this process for the benefit of your shareholders, other people who have a stake.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Jay. I guess I can't state this as factual knowledge, but I strongly suspect that a lot of these CAs have one or very few individuals who do these tasks by themselves in a back room, and there's just no visibility.
I feel that some CAs, their compliance program and the people in it, as you say, typically very small department, they kind of work in a bubble.
Yeah.
And the executives of the company are typically like, oh, thank God I don't have to deal with that stuff. Right. I'll just let that run itself.
Again, my brain starts to spin every time they start throwing out these words. My eyes glaze over. I don't understand what they're saying. Right.
But your eyes shouldn't glaze over when you're looking at that list.
Yeah. You should be able to understand the concept of obfuscation. You should be able to understand the concept of knowingly tell a lie. Right?
Perhaps one way of doing it, just an idea, is to poll other CAs. Hey, how are we doing? Right? Pick an executive member of a team. Perhaps it's your chief counsel or something like that. And you actually go off to the other CAs, have a dialogue, and say, how would you, what's your take on our compliance?
Yeah, and I think you've just got me thinking with that comment, Jay. One of the things, and I never thought about it in this term, but one of the things that we're trying to do at Sectigo is we understand that we have a level of resourcing and experience that is quite atypical. There are very few CAs who can point to that, who have the number of 20-plus year veterans that we do. Very few. And we appreciate that your and my very esteemed colleague, Rob Stradling, likes to say you can't become a 20-year PKI expert until you've been doing it for 20 years, right? And of course, he's correct. And so part of what we do with things like this and other frameworks and things we've had, and again, if you go back to that privilege of being a public CA episode and some other ones we've done, is we're trying to take these thoughts and ideas that are abstracting it up a level from a like, here's the browser root store requirements, but it's almost the deeper root cause analysis thing, right? How do you learn these more general lessons that you can then take away and turn them into your process and your culture, right? And if a CA is watching this, my suggestion is write down that list. It's easy for you to get. We numbered them. We said that they were. And go make it a KPI, right? Say, we're going to get a green check mark on every one of these things at the end of the year. And you will be better for it.
Exactly. That's very understandable to any organization. These are normal practices in most of the rest of your business. Why compliance programs sometimes end up being these rogue bubbles that disrupt our entire industry, and that's just allowed to happen. And catastrophic things end up happening because of that behavior. This list is not hard to understand, and building KPIs to help to avoid it is not difficult to do. A little bit of oversight, I think, can go a long way.
Yeah, I think and it's ironic that it's a governance function that needs governance.
Exactly right.
But I think it is.
Yes. I can tell you that here in Canada, and those of you who are judges, maybe you can tell me differently, but that's one of the problems, is that they're kind of self-policing, but they're kind of not, and there's really nobody's inside looking at them.
Yeah. So So anyway, I think this framework here, I don't think this is the last time we're going to be discussing this.
No, this needs to be something we keep on our list.
Yeah, and maybe I'm just thinking, as we do report things that are going on in Bugzilla, maybe at that point we'll return to this framework. Say things like, look, see here, you're kind of getting number 5 and number 7 wrong. Or whatever.
Exactly. Thank you, Tim.
Hope it's not number 10. Lies and cover-ups.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. All right. So anyway, thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
This has been Root Causes.